Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC 186, Johnson versus Horiguchi. Obviously, this card is terrible. Really hit hard with the injury to Dillashaw and Rampage being pulled from the card. But I will say that before this card fell apart, I actually didn't think it was too bad. I thought the two title fights at the top with Johnson and Horiguchi and Dillashaw and Barao, I thought that was pretty good. But I did notice that Makdessi versus Shane Campbell, I think Makdessi was supposed to fight. It was supposed to fight Abel Trujillo, but Makdessi and then the Yves Jabouin Thomas Almeida fight, I did take note that those two cards were on the pay-per-view and had no business being there. So I think those are really weak fights that kind of add to just the disaster of this card. And originally, I couldn't care less about seeing Rampage Jackson again. I thought Maldonado was a horrible opponent for Rampage. Not that he couldn't beat him, but just because I didn't care and it didn't feel relevant at all. But now that Steve Bosse stepped in for Rampage, now I'm missing Rampage and wishing he was back on this card. But anyways, I have about zero motivation to do predictions here. For this, I'll try to run through it really quickly. Starting off with the Fight Pass preliminary card at women's strawweight, Aisling Daly versus Randa Markos, two contestants from Tough 20. Aisling Daly got a TKO win over Angela Magana in the first round, and then lost to Jessica Penne in the semifinals. And I actually thought Daly won that fight. I think I scored it for her, but I remember it being close. And then won her debut in the finale against Alex Chambers. Had a pretty quick armbar. Strong grappler. Kind of an unorthodox style that you see with some of the Irish fighters from her same camp, like Paddy Houlihan and some of the other guys. Conor McGregor with the unorthodox movement. Daly has a lot of that. And Randa Markos, I thought she was really impressive on the show, and I thought that she did well against Jessica Penne in the finale. Didn't win the fight. I think I gave her the middle round, but a really strong wrestler. I thought her striking looked improved in the finale, and had the submission win over Felice Herrig. I think got her in a crucifix position and made her tap, locking up her shoulder with her legs, and that was pretty impressive. I'm going to take Markos here. I just don't think Daly's kind of unorthodox grappling and kind of scramble heavy submission grappling is going to hold up to Markos's kind of traditional wrestling and heavy top control. So I'm going to go with Markos here. I just think she has the better style of grappling to win this fight. And next up, also at women's strawweight, Jessica Rakoczy versus Valerie Letourneau. Jessica Rakoczy coming back after a year-and-a-half layoff, lost to Juliana Pena in the Tough 18 finale. Lost really quickly, taken down, mounted, and pounded out. Looked identical to Pena's recent win over Dudieva. But Letourneau fought Elizabeth Phillips. I think that was back in June, and I thought she looked pretty good. Struggled a bit early on, but really found her range. Looks tall for the weight class. Was taller than Phillips, and was really pumping the jab and being effective with the range striking as the fight went on. And I thought she looked pretty decent with her kickboxing. I'm going to take Letourneau here. Rakoczy, I just don't think looks like a high-level fighter. Really, none of the women other than Pena from that show have really had too much success in the UFC. There's Pennington, but just losing to her last fight to Holly Holm, and I don't think Rakoczy. I don't think her striking is going to hold up to Letourneau, so I'm going to go with Letourneau. And next up at welterweight, Nordine Taleb versus Chris Clements. Nordine Taleb, he was on Tough Nations, lost to Tyler Manuara. I actually watched that fight and I thought Taleb won it. And then competed in the preliminary round, I think, for Tough 19 and lost to Mike King. And then in the finale for Tough Nations, beat Vic Grujic, and in his last fight beat Li Jingliang. And against Grujic, he was able to just take him down at will, but really did nothing with it, didn't open up with ground and pound, and it was a really ugly fight. Kind of a lay and pray fest for Taleb. And then against Jingliang, kind of put a beating on him, jabbed him up, really showed good technical striking, but as dominant as he was, never really was able to threaten with a finish. Chris Clements, though, is the opposite. He really goes for that finish. A really dynamic striker, spinning attacks. Won his last fight against Vic Grujic, was hurt early on, but was able to get the finish. I think caught him with, I think it was a spinning back fist, or I believe it was, but ended up putting out Grujic. And before that, got knocked out by Stephen Thompson. And before that, had a loss to Matthew Riddle, a fight he was winning with, that dynamic striking. Landed some spinning back kicks, but ended up getting submitted, and the fight got overturned to a no contest. But I have to go with, I'm going to go with Clements here. Taleb, I think, will be the more technical striker, but his inability to finish, I think, is really going to hurt him here. Clements, pretty old, I think, 39, and I think that definitely showed against Grujic in his last fight. Got rocked early on, but with his aggressive striking and spinning attacks, I think he'll be able to do enough to overcome the technical striking and range of Taleb. So I'm going to go with Clements, but his chin could just be compromised enough at this point that Taleb might be able to put him out. But I'm going to take Clements. Next up on the Fox Sports 1 preliminary card at lightweight, Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus David Michaud. Aubin-Mercier, the finalist from Tough Nations, lost to Chad Laprise in the finale, kind of an uneventful decision, and then won his last fight against Jake Lindsay. Had a really nice submission finish there, an inverted triangle. Has a judo background, and you saw those judo skills in his fight against Lindsay, but doesn't seem to really open up with that early. It took him a while before he attempted any judo throws, even when it seemed that Lindsay couldn't do anything to threaten him. And I think he's a little too hesitant with that. I'd like to see him really open up with those judo throws and get to the ground sooner. His striking, I think, is subpar. But David Michaud, I think he should just run over. Michaud looks absolutely terrible. He lost his fight to get into the Tough House in Tough 16. I believe he lost by arm triangle choke from the bottom. And in the UFC, lost his debut to Li Jingliang. Was able to get the takedown almost anytime he wanted, but couldn't hold down Jingliang. And then on the feet, tried to strike with Jing Liang, and just went terribly for him. Got jabbed up and bloodied up. Really looked bad. And then his last fight against Garrett Whiteley, he won that fight, but did not look good at all in doing it. Was able to close distance, get the takedown, but at one point in the fight, he was eating elbows from side control, and Whiteley was actually winning the position, even though he was on bottom. For as many times as he was able to get the takedown and get in top position, couldn't open up with any significant ground and pound, and his striking just looks very, very amateurish. So I have to go with Aubin-Mercier to get a submission win here, and I think it'll be pretty easy for him. Next up at lightweight, Chad Laprise versus Brian Barberena. Laprise, the winner of Tough Nations, beat Aubin-Mercier, and then after that fight, beat Yosdenis Cedeno, and showed off some good grappling skills. Was able to take him down at will. Got the body triangle, took his back, and that was really the entire fight. Kind of a technical, patient striker, although I remember vividly his knockout of Cajun Johnson in the house, which he really set up and timed perfectly. So has skills on the feet, seems to be adding ground skills. Not a super aggressive fighter, though. And Brian Barberena got the finish over Joe Ellenberger in his last fight. I didn't think he looked good, even though he was able to get the finish. I mean, Joe Ellenberger fell apart, and I think that was his sickness. I think that was his sickness that was affecting him there. That's what it looked like to me. He just gassed real early, and Barberena, even though Ellenberger really wasn't fighting back, still took him a while to get the finish. I think Laprise is just a far more polished and refined striker, so I'm taking Laprise to win this. Next up at women's bantamweight, Alexis Davis versus Sarah Kaufman. Kind of a big fight. Two ladies who, Sarah Kaufman, actually, I thought she won her fight against Jessica Eye. To me, she hasn't really lost in the UFC in that sense. But Alexis Davis, coming off the loss to Ronda Rousey, which is just, that's as dominant as you could lose in the UFC. Her win over Jessica Eye, though, which I didn't think she won that fight, she was able to take her down and open up with some ground and pound there, but hasn't been really dominant with the grappling in the UFC against Rosie Sexton. Gassed pretty early, and against Liz Carmouche landed some leg kicks, but they just circled around the cage the entire fight, and it was very uneventful. I'm gonna go with Sarah Kaufman here. Seems like an aggressive, pretty accurate striker. Won her last fight against Leslie Smith. That was a year ago. I thought she won the fight against Jessica Eye. That was kind of a back and forth brawl, slugfest. And those are her only two fights in the UFC. But Davis really shouldn't have the striking to hang with her here. If she's able to get it to the ground, I could see the possibility of her grinding out a decision that way. But I think Kaufman's too good for that and will end up getting the win here, possibly hurting her on the feet. Next up, last fight on the prelim card at welterweight, Patrick Cote versus Joe Riggs. Joe Riggs, when you snap your neck on your own takedown, I think that's a sign that your time in the sport has long since passed, and I just think he needs to retire. I actually picked him to win that fight against Ben Saunders. I thought taking him down, I actually thought he was going to win the fight with top control. I watched him on Fight Master Hadn't really followed his career outside of the UFC before that, and obviously he was fighting really low-level competition there, but I thought that his top control looked okay, and still looked athletically healthy enough to compete. But like I said, snapping his neck on his own takedown, a terrible sign. And Cote hasn't looked great in the UFC, but has still gotten some wins against some not terrible competition, but kind of okay guys. I didn't expect him to get the win over Kyle Noak. His wrestling looked pretty strong there. Was able to get the win over Bobby Volker, showed some decent striking and wrestling in that fight. And then his last fight against Stephen Thompson, a very uneventful fight, and he didn't do much at all. Thompson didn't do much to him, and Cote couldn't do much to get past the range striking of Thompson. Couldn't complete any takedowns or really be effective with his striking. But I have to go with Cote here. I just think he's still a lot more mobile and healthy than Riggs at this point. I'd like to see Riggs win. I could possibly see him winning, if he's healthy enough to make it through the fight. I think his top control might be able to compete with Cote's wrestling, but I don't think it should really be close. I think Cote's just still healthy enough to compete, and Riggs isn't. Alright, so moving on to the main card. Bantamweight Yves Jabouin versus Thomas Almeida. I said that I didn't feel this should be on the pay-per-view portion of the card, and I completely stand by that. But I do think it is a fun matchup. I just think this is more of a leading prelim status, not a pay-per-view opener. Thomas Almeida coming off of a great debut over Tim Gorman, who was on Tough 18, got injured, and was never able to compete in the preliminary round, and wasn't able to finish him, but Tim Gorman also fought Mitch Gagnon about a year ago, and Gagnon, a pretty dangerous fighter, wasn't able to finish him either, so I don't think that's a knock on Almeida at all. But just seemed to have really accurate, fluid striking, was very aggressive, kept a high pace throughout the entire fight, looked really good hand speed. Yves Jabouin, though, kind of a quiet gatekeeper. I've been watching him since the WEC. In the UFC, never really got the big win. Got the win over Mike Easton in his last fight, and it was pretty impressive. He was able to win both on the feet and with the takedowns. Had his moments against Eddie Wineland on the feet early on, was giving him some trouble before Wineland was able to hurt him and finish him off. Against Dustin Peg, I think that was a fight where Peg had him in a lot of submissions attempts off of his back. I think had him in some triangles and things like that, and Jabouin was able to escape those and get some ground and pound off, and got knocked out by Brad Pickett. Had some other wins over some low-level guys who aren't in the UFC anymore. So he's never really gotten that big win, hasn't been a very active fighter, but Jabouin, I think his striking's very dynamic. A lot of spinning kicks and stuff like that. I think he's a solid veteran fighter. Has skills everywhere, but just not quite a world beater. And Almeida looks like he has a lot of promise and potential and upside. I think he's going to be more aggressive here. I think he's just going to beat Jabouin to the punch. So I'm going to take Almeida, but, if Almeida is kind of an overhyped prospect, I think Jabouin is definitely capable and talented enough, the kind of fighter who could beat, a young guy coming up in the game. But Jabouin just hasn't been active enough, getting older. He's 35, so I have to take Almeida here. Got to go with the youth and the momentum. All right, next up, John Makdessi versus Shane Campbell. It says here this is a catchweight fight at 160. I guess I'm assuming because Campbell stepped in on short notice for Trujillo. And actually it says here that was on April 1st. So I don't understand why it's a catchweight. But anyways, Makdessi hasn't fought since a year ago, the last year's Super Bowl card. Lost to Alan Patrick. I actually thought he won that fight, but it's not a fight where there was where you got a lot of hope for Makdessi after watching that. Makdessi, a kickboxer, wins over Cruikshank, knocked out Hene Forch, and got a decision win over Sam Stout. We've seen him struggle, though, with some of the more talented range kickboxers. Enja Kawani was able to keep him on the end of his jab all day. Dennis Hallman kind of put an old man beating on him a couple years ago, just took him down, pounded on him, and submitted him. And then before that, had a knockout over Kyle Watson, win over Pat Audenwood, but hasn't fought in over a year. And I actually thought he lost the Sam Stout fight as well. So, it seems a little inconsistent at times. And then against Patrick, was able to close the distance, get inside, but couldn't do a whole lot with it there. And Shane Campbell, have no idea who this guy is, so I'm not going to make a pick here. I'm going to assume Makdessi will be able to win. UFC experience and has shown some good striking skill, but I don't know. I don't see Makdessi going on a tear and climbing the ranks in the division, especially when you have a lot of other younger fighters who've been really active this year, like Darius just getting a big win, Ali Quinta. I don't see Makdessi making a run like that. All right, next up, light heavyweight, Fabio Maldonado versus Steve Bassett. Like I said, didn't care to see Rampage originally on this card after he fell out, and now we have Bassett versus Maldonado, and still on the main card. Now I'm really wishing Rampage would have stayed on here, but Bassett, I don't know who he is, and Maldonado, definitely not. I wouldn't call him a high-level fighter, but definitely good enough to beat the lower tier guys in the UFC, especially his division. His last fight against Hans Stringer was really struggling with the wrestling and the grappling early on. Was able to just turn it around, I think, I believe it was the third round, maybe late second. Just turned it around and got the TKO finish. Has a really funky rhythm with his boxing, kind of irregular timing, hard for guys to figure it out. Against Gian Vellante, also struggled with the wrestling early on, got taken down, but then was able to take over with that boxing. Goes to the body a lot. And in his fight against Stipe Miocic, just got knocked out in the opening seconds. Really kind of terrible. Losses to Teixeira, Poke Riots, Kyle Kingsbury, wins over Hallett, Beltran, and Vellante. So, hasn't really beaten anyone that good, and has lost to guys who also weren't that good other than Teixeira. So, definitely not an invincible fighter, but a guy you do have to take seriously. And if Bassett is just kind of a typical newcomer who doesn't really look like he belongs in the UFC, I certainly think Maldonado will win the fight. If Bassett has a lot of potential, he's a dangerous fighter, I could certainly see him taking out Maldonado, but I'm going to take, or I would assume that Maldonado can win this fight, but can't make a pick here. All right, moving on to the co-main event, middleweight Michael Bisping versus CB Dollaway. Not really excited for this fight, and I don't understand the UFC's recent really investment and the really hard pushing of CB Dollaway. I mean, he got 2 wins over guys. One guy who just seems to get knocked out in every fight of his now, which is Cesar Ferreira, and then a win over Carmont, who got cut from the UFC. So, you know, maybe in hindsight, those wins aren't as great as they seemed at the time. But to go from that, and I remember at the Berlin event after he beat Carmont, Dana White, you know, kind of ridiculing Dollaway. I thought, you know, in really bad taste, saying, you know, he had no skills on the mic. But then, you know, to put him down like that and then put him in against Machida, I thought was just really weird, and obviously got destroyed there. Just took one body kick and he was out. And, you know, I don't really understand giving him Machida and then giving him this another high-profile fight against Bisping. CB Dollaway has certainly improved a lot, has really made great strides. I mean, I think back to his fight against Jason Mayhem Miller, where he was getting dropped repeatedly and really had to rely on those takedowns. And now to see him, he was able to get the knockout over Ferreira, although I think that knockout was a little, kind of a little overplayed. You know, if you watch the highlight, he's swinging with his hands at his waist and with his back right up against the fence, and Ferreira just standing right in front of him. I mean, not great technical skill, but you know, didn't seem like Ferreira was mentally in there, just standing right in front of him. But in his fight after that against Carmont, I thought he put everything together really well. The striking and the takedowns transitioned between them well, and was able to get a knockdown of Carmont in that fight. I thought that was one of the, you know, his most complete performances we've seen from him. And then his fight against Tim Boetsch before he fought, I think that was before the Ferreira fight. I thought he won that fight. His hand speed looked really good, was putting together big combinations. Looked like he was hurting Boetsch. So CB Dollaway's definitely improved. I don't think his striking is good enough to beat Bisping. Bisping is certainly getting older, has slowed down, but even though he got finished pretty easily by Rockhold, I actually wasn't surprised by the outcome there. And obviously Rockhold coming off of his win over Machida, I think everyone now really sees how elite of a fighter he is. I don't think the losses to Rockhold is really indicative of Bisping, you know, kind of, you know, being done. I mean, obviously he's, I don't think he has much time left, but was able to get the finish over Kung Lee, still looked pretty active on the feet. The fight against Tim Kennedy was not good, was coming back from a long layoff at that point, and just got outworked and really had no answer for the grappling and wrestling of Kennedy. But Kennedy was a high-level fighter in the division and a really talented grappler. So my point is, I don't see Bisping as like one of these Dan Henderson type guys or Gray Maynard who, you know, they're just getting knocked out with ease in all of their fights. I don't see him there yet, and I do think his kickboxing is still good enough, dynamic enough to beat Dollaway. I don't think, you know, Dollaway mixes the kicks and the strikes with the fluidity that Bisping does. I could see Dollaway getting some takedowns, but, you know, Dollaway I don't think is the kind of really persistent grappler that Kennedy is. I just see Bisping outstriking him on the feet, being more diverse, having more forward pressure than Dollaway. So I'm going to take Bisping here. You know, he has suffered a couple of knockouts, knocked down by Rockhold in his last fight and knocked out by my Belfort. Dollaway, I think, would have a chance to land a big punch, but I see Bisping just outstriking him here for a decision win. And then the main event, Demetrius Johnson versus Kyoji Horiguchi for the flyweight strap. Kyoji Horiguchi, I think everyone is, really discrediting him. I've been intrigued with this guy since his debut fight in the UFC. His knockout over Dustin Pig at bantamweight. That was really impressive. And then dropped down to flyweight. I think he's had 3 wins in a row. Beat Daryl Montague, John De Los Reyes, Luis Gaudino, all in the past year. The Montague fight, he came close to getting a finish. Really dominant. Had him hurt the entire fight. De Los Reyes got the knockout in the first round. And then in his last fight against Gaudino, kind of disappointing. He didn't get the finish. Didn't really hurt him too much, but was in complete control with the striking. I think landed a flying knee or a few throughout the fight. And his movement, I think, is going to be interesting in this fight. Does a lot of bobbing up and down on his feet and moving side to side, hopping around the cage. I think that's an interesting look. Certainly a different look than Mighty Mouse has faced. In the UFC, doesn't have the experience and doesn't have the fights against the big names like some of the other guys Johnson has fought. With Benavidez and Moraga, Dodson. But I do think he has an interesting style. I'm not taking him to win this fight at all. I'm not even saying he has a puncher's chance, but I do think he'll have some moments in this fight where people are gonna kind of recognize him as a really talented fighter and kind of worthy of this opportunity. Which honestly, it feels like they're just picking guys at random here to fight Mighty Mouse, but I don't know if there's really anyone else. That's just how weak the division is, but I don't know if there's really a better case for anyone to get a title shot over Horiguchi. And, Johnson's been cracked in a couple of his fights. Dodson was able to drop him. Benavidez in their first fight dropped him at one point. And Moraga was able to drop him even after being dominated for, I think, 3 rounds. I think it was in the 4th round that Moraga dropped him. Johnson can be cracked, and Horiguchi has shown big power. And with that unorthodox movement, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a knockdown here. But Demetrius Johnson, just a world-class fighter. Starting to run through guys. Has shown knockout power. The knockout over Benavidez was really surprising, but very impressive. And then his last fight, getting the submission win over Chris Carriasso pretty easily, really dominating him with the wrestling. A couple of his fights, I don't think he looked that great. The Bagotinov fight, I think, kind of struggled to, really do any significant damage on the feet, but did outland him and had the speed advantage. But Johnson, I think he can probably get a finish here. I just think Horiguchi is going to have at least one moment here where he surprises people and kind of proves his worth. But Johnson, got to go with Johnson. Also had the armbar finish over Moraga late in their fight. Gets stronger as the fight goes on. We saw that against Dodson. Has a real good tie clinch and knees from that position. One of the pound-for-pound best. I don't think anyone in the division can really beat him at this point. The one kind of dark horse guy that I'm really looking forward to their fight, if Ray Borg can fight some big names and continue to win. I thought he looked incredible in his last fight with his wrestling and his positional control. I'd love to see Borg fight Demetrius Johnson at some point. But Kyoji Horiguchi, I think he's just going down. Not enough experience against the top guys, and hasn't even finished all of the guys he's fought. So, got to go with Johnson. I think on the feet, even though Horiguchi has the unorthodox movement. I think Johnson will still have a big speed advantage, so got to go with Johnson. All right, guys, those are my predictions for UFC 186, Johnson versus Horiguchi. I have a feeling this video didn't turn out too well. I'm very tired and not motivated at all. I wasn't motivated to really do predictions here, but I will be back, and with more time, I'll try to have the video have it out a week and a half before the fight or so. Fight night Adelaide, which I'm really looking forward to. A lot better than this 186 card. At least one or two matchups there that I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, I'll have my predictions out for those. And thank you for watching, guys. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.